That good old free speech. It's back on the menu, boys. Maybe. It's been hinted that this has been in the works for a while, but today it was made official. Mark Zuckerberg is turning over a new leaf. He's seen the light. He is now a free speech advocate. Mark, buddy, where have you been this whole time?
Architectural Artcast.
Like any good architecture type, I have an opinion. But to make matters worse, I have a microphone as well. So you all can imagine I have a few things to say about Zuckerberg's announcement. Before we go down that road, I want to lay a foundation, the context of this announcement. Zuckerberg isn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He hasn't suddenly seen the error of his ways. As far as I'm concerned, the only reason why he made this announcement is because he was drugged to it kicking and screaming. Did you all know that there was a presidential election back at the beginning of November? Yeah, I know a lot of people weren't aware, but trust me, it happened. And here's the interesting thing. The guy that everybody was telling us was the most evil being to ever exist won, rather convincingly. Within weeks of this evil being winning the election, Mark Zuckerberg raced to his house to have dinner with evil incarnate. Why was Zuckerberg so anxious to break bread with evil? Two reasons: business and personal. Zuckerberg's businesses, Facebook, the rest of his social media empire, are facing increasing legal pressures. If he can get in good with this evil guy, then maybe the evil guy will convince the federal government to take the foot off the gas, to let up on the legal pressures. The legal issues that Zuckerberg's businesses face pale in comparison to Zuckerberg's real concern: keeping his own scrawny little butt out of prison. Why would this evil guy openly threaten to send Zuckerberg to jail for the rest of his life? Do y'all remember Zuckerberg bucks? Back in 2020, due to the extraordinary circumstances of that election and in an effort to ensure fairness and equity, Zuckerberg, through his non-profit and of course very non-partisan charity, donated money directly to election officials to help them pay for this new election infrastructure. Who could criticize such generosity? All Zuckerberg wanted to do was help contribute to what we were told at the time were the fairest and safest elections in the world. Well, let's start with Wisconsin. Turns out the voters of Wisconsin were less than thrilled with Zuckerberg giving money directly to their elected officials. The measure to prevent him from doing that ever again passed rather easily. It turns out Wisconsin voters also expected their elected officials to actually do the job they were elected to do and not outsource it. 26 other states also passed similar laws. So Zuckerberg got involved in politics. Lots of rich people dip their toes into politics all the time. What's the big deal? I'll let the lawyers argue the details, but one legal question that has come up: giving money directly to election officials just might be considered bribery. And Zuckerberg just might be on the hook for thousands of counts of bribery. Oops. Whether you or I think that Zuckerberg engaged in bribery really doesn't matter. But you remember that guy that everybody told us was evil? The guy that just so happened to win the election back in November? Well, apparently he thinks that Zuckerberg just might be guilty of bribing election officials in an effort to influence their decision-making processes. Kinda makes sense why Zuckerberg would be all hot and bothered, so anxious to rush down to go break bread with a guy that his social media platforms spent years trying to convince the world was evil incarnate. The shocking results of the election back in November has sent shockwaves through the system. With the blowing winds of change, we have all sorts of interesting people with all new attitudes. People like Cenk Uygur suddenly want to talk to people that just mere months ago he was demonizing as scum of the earth. With these changing cultural winds, all of a sudden, we have people who, no matter what they said and did in the past, they're all in. No, 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 no. They have always been in. No, 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 no. They're the real reason these changes are happening. Some are telling the truth. Some, they're just looking to see which way the wind blows. They always go whichever the way the wind blows. And then they're the real snakes in the grass, those looking to twist and manipulate things for their own agenda. How do we know which is which? My grandmother used to always tell me, listen to a man's proposition before you condemn it. Pay attention to what people say. More often than not, they're telling us a lot more than they even realize they're saying. And then hold them accountable to what they claim they're going to do. Fancy way of saying trust but verify. Zuckerberg comes out with an announcement that he's now going to be supporting free speech on his social media platforms. Let's look at what he actually said. Our buddy Mark starts his announcement by declaring that he's always been about free speech. The very reason that he created his social media platforms is so that the people would have a voice. Don't you understand? Before Mark came along, we, the people, didn't have a voice. The only reason we have a voice today, however censored it might be, is because Mark gave it to us. Mark wants to return to his roots of giving us, the people, our voice again. But, and there's always a but, despite Mark's dedication to free speech, there has been a lot that's been happening over the last few years. You see, we can't just let people say anything. It might cause harm. Now, I didn't want to censor. It was the government and the legacy media who were pushing me to censor. And yeah, some of the censorship was political in nature. But there's also a legitimate reason to be censoring because of all the bad stuff you people are posting on social media. Having said all that, it's still not my fault all this censorship got out of hand. It's the complex algorithm's fault. Y'all will notice Mark doesn't take responsibility for any of the censorship. It's our fault for posting inappropriate things. It's the government, legacy media's fault for demanding censorship. The algorithm is complex and it just made mistakes. Mark nor his social media platforms have any blame in censorship getting out of control. To Mark's credit, he's upfront about why he's making these decisions. The recent elections. There is now a political, economic price to pay for censoring people. So he now wants us to believe that he was always opposed to censorship. But again, because it was never his fault. In Mark's zeal, desperation to absolve himself and his social media platforms of any responsibility having to do with anything censorship related, I don't think he realizes the defense that he's actually putting up. I was just doing what I was told. I was following orders. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that's not a defense that I'd be going with. Then again, I don't have a whole team of publicists and high-powered lawyers writing my statements for me. Old Mark seems to be really concerned about this question of accountability when it comes to censorship, because later in his statement, he again goes out of his way to remind us that it was the governments around the world that were forcing free speech-loving Mark Zuckerberg and his social media platforms to censor people. They didn't really want to do it, but they were made to do it. They were just following orders. Mark then tells us that the last 4 years were particularly difficult for him and his social media platforms because the U.S. government was forcing them to censor people. Again, the legal experts can argue over the details of the law, but here in America, federal government censoring the voice of we the people, particularly in a political social context, is straight up illegal. Bad juju. No, can't do it. But, and there's always a but, For various legal reasons, again, talk to the legal experts, it can be difficult holding the federal government and or federal employees responsible for censoring we the people. Guess what? It's also illegal for individuals, corporations, nonprofits, whoever. It's illegal for all of them to collude with the federal government, to censor we the people on behalf of the federal government. Y'all want to know something else? You know all those reasons why it's difficult to hold the federal government, federal employees accountable for their misbehavior, for their censoring we the people? Guess what? They don't apply to the non-government collaborators. And yes, I use that specific word intentionally. Old Mark has found himself in quite the predicament. There is no debate that he was censoring his social media platforms. There is no debate that the federal government, various other governments around the country were asking him to censor. And there's no debate that he was censoring on behalf of these governments. Thanks to Elon Musk buying Twitter, X, we now know the extent of the collusion between these corporations and the government. There were government agencies who had offices in the buildings censoring in real time. To make matters worse, Zuckerberg is on the record under oath testifying to Congress justifying all of his censorship. At this point, the only defense he has left is, I didn't want to do it. They made me do it. Should we trust Mark Zuckerberg? Should we believe that he is now going to guarantee free speech on his social media platforms? No. Mark Zuckerberg is an authoritarian oligarch who thinks he has the right to tell we the people what we should think, believe, and do, all because of who he is, because of his wealth, power, and influence. In 2016, old Mark put his thumb on the scale. He tried to influence the outcome of an election by controlling people's access to information. He wanted to influence how they thought, thus affecting their behavior, who they voted for. The problem was the unwashed masses, the plebs, they were too stupid to do what their betters were telling them to do. So in 2020, old Mark was still putting his thumb on the scale, still controlling information, still trying to influence behavior. But this time around, he just bypassed the voters, went straight to the elected officials. Here's some money. Doesn't matter the numbers, just give me the outcome I want. As the old saying goes, if you're going to take the king's head, you better take the king's head. The last 8 years, everybody has revealed who they are. All the cards are on the table. You know what you're getting when you walk in the door. Whether you agree or disagree with the guy, love him or hate him, most people will acknowledge Trump has a long memory, and he's very good at holding a grudge. Where I come from, we have another expression. Payback is a I don't know about y'all, but I would not have wanted to have been in Zuckerberg's shoes at that dinner at Mar-a-Lago, because I'm pretty sure he was told in no uncertain terms, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it and like it. Mark Zuckerberg is a snake in the grass. He believes he has the right to give and take free speech as he sees fit, as it benefits him and his agenda. Currently, that agenda is survival. The moment Mark Zuckerberg thinks that that knife is no longer at his throat, metaphorically speaking, he will turn on we the people in an instant, reveal who he is, who he's always been, an authoritarian oligarch who thinks that he has the right to demand that we think, behave, and act as he sees fit. Old Mark has a problem, though, a major problem. He's wrong. We, the people, had a voice long before he ever showed up, and he doesn't have the right to give or take free speech as he sees fit. Free speech is an unalienable right. Old Mark's proposed changes? They sound fine on paper, but they're irrelevant. What he giveth, he can taketh away. What matters is that we, the people, have been given a reprieve, a very brief reprieve, 3 to 4 years. What are we going to do in that short time period to ensure that the oligarchs, the government, no longer have the ability or the will to try to take our free speech ever again. Screw the oligarchs. Come and take it. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about, and until next time, you all be safe. If you all are still here, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. While you're at it, why don't you like this video, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. You can hear me yammer on about something else next time. And feel free to share this video far and wide.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.